Hey guys, so today I'm going to go over another one of the salmonella replacements that I recommended. This is frankly my favorite salmonella replacement, Blue Jay, and this is his video on history's worst Olympic marathon in a nutshell. So he does a lot of very obscure historical events and puts a comedic twist on it. So here we go.
With roots spanning 2,800 years to ancient Greece, the Olympics have become the pinnacle of athletic achievement, with the awarding of a gold medal being seen as internationally equivalent to winning a Nobel Prize, Pulitzer Prize, or my parents' approval.
So I wouldn't go that far, but up there at the top you have Michael Phelps. But winning a gold medal is actually not very profitable for the athletes, and unless you're a star athlete and you can get a bunch of deals for endorsements or sponsorships, you really don't make that much money. I think you're only awarded like $30,000 for a gold medal, and keep in mind you can only get one every 4 years. Compare that to contracts you see in the NFL and the NBA, and they're just really not up to speed of what some of these elite athletes in, I'm gonna say, more obscure sports get, which is kind of sad because someone like who dedicates their whole life to get a gold medal should get more than what they receive.
The world's best from all walks of life meet to prove their excellence in humanity's
Best
greatest
looking.
cities:
I might differ on
Athens,
that one.
Paris, St. Louis. Yep, the third Olympic Games and America's first outing as host took place in St. Louis in 1904. But early 20th century St.
So St. Louis is very interesting because it was kind of seen as the gateway city to the West. So prior to the establishment of St. Louis and the establishment of Kansas City, there was really no cities in the central part of the United States, and everything was reliant on Chicago. But what happens is that you start to see St. Louis and Kansas City, Omaha, all these cities prop up, which eventually give more life and give more spirit into the West. So that's kind of why they started promoting cities like this, and is why St. Louis was seen as a good destination for the Olympics. Also, it's literally in the center of the country.
doesn't quite have the sex appeal of Athens or Paris. So how does one spice it up a bit? That's right, rat poison, brandy, and human experimentation. Originally, the 1904 Games were to be held in Chicago, but that same year, the World's Fair was celebrating the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase in St. Louis. What would be the world's largest fair to date had fascinating exhibits like the first ever X-ray machine, the radio phone, and all your favorite different looking people on display. Remember, kids, you can't have a fair without a healthy dose of racial superiority. Even
So let's go back to that a bit. So what would happen in these shows? They would have different countries exhibit. So they would have a French exhibit, a Germany exhibit. But what they also did is they wanted to showcase the various colonies. And what that meant was putting a stereotypical view of who lived in said colonies. And that would mean dressing up a bunch of natives in basically nothing to show the quote unquote savages of these lands. And it was a very terrible time, but keep in mind this was the same period that freak shows were not taboo, and there that's kind of a shame, but that's where it's at.
indigenous mud throwing contests being the crowd drawers they are, they didn't want to have to compete for spectators. So they threatened to overshadow the Olympics with their own sporting events, and successfully moved the Olympics to St. Louis. The first debacle in the clusterfuck that was the 1904 Olympics was the issue of location. With them lazy Wright boys not having double-decker Boeing 747s out yet, for foreign athletes, getting to St. Louis involved a lengthy boat trip, followed by a 1,000-mile train ride. Combined with the fact that the Russians and Japanese were having a disagreement at the time, a measly 12 nations showed up, with only 62 of the 651 athletes hailing from outside of North America.
And this was a big problem because if you look at the countries involved, you have Cuba, which is really the only country that isn't either the United States or North America or European powers. this is an issue. This has got to be a more of an international event, and now it is an international event. But if you look at this, the early Olympics was very, very Eurocentric and very, very posed to Western civilization.
The eye of the storm centered on the iconic marathon event. The 1904 Olympic Marathon was more freak show than showpiece, ironically, more fitting for the fair like atmosphere than a prestigious sporting event. Instead of the typical morning start time, this one was held in the afternoon, where temperatures soared to 92 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity in the 90s. This means the race took place with a heat index of a scorching 135 degrees Fahrenheit.
So this is very off topic, but the expected heat that our ancestors lived during the great extinction event for the dinosaurs was around 135 degrees under the earth because we came from small mammals that were almost like mice who just burrowed under the earth to escape from the high temperatures, and that's theoretically how we evolved from those creatures.
For context, ideal marathon conditions are around 41 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like replacing your CPU cooler with a tungsten arc welding torch. Only 32 runners from 4 nations participated in the race. A few were experienced runners, having won or placed in past marathons, but the majority were misfits. Of these misfits, we have 2 South African Tswana tribesmen visiting St. Louis for a certain World's Fair exhibit, who ran.
Imagine if you just had random people on the street join Olympic events. That's essentially what happens. You always talk about during the Olympics, like, can I do this? Well, they're literally going to show you in this marathon what happens when normal people do this.
Barefoot. 10 Greeks who had never run a marathon a day in their lives.
There you go.
And Cuban national Felix Carbajal, a former mailman who demonstrated his running skills throughout Cuba to raise money. He was even reported to have ran the entire span of the island. Once he raised enough, he bought passage to the US and arrived in New Orleans. What's this quaint little contest? Dice. One in? Oh, well, I suppose I could spare $1 or $2. Dame los dados. Upon arrival, Felix lost all of his money on a game of dice, forcing him to hitchhike and walk his room.
Okay, what in the world? This guy ran the whole length of Cuba just to lose all of his money in New Orleans. That's hilarious. I'm hoping this guy wins the marathon. This guy, and I'm hoping he wears his funny little hat the whole time.
Journey to St. Louis. Felix approached the starting line in a long sleeve shirt, long dark pants, street shoes, and, naturally, a beret. Hey, when you're 5 feet tall.
What the fuck is this guy doing? This is 135 degrees, and this man is wearing basically what you would wear in the winter, plus normal street shoes to a marathon. That is gotta be insane. This is gonna be remarkable if this man medals.
Amongst marathoners and all their short shorts, thigh glistening glory, you have to stand out somehow. A fellow Olympian felt bad and offered him scissors to cut his pants, making him some improvised shorts that bring a smile to any redneck's face. The starting pistol was fired, and the runners embarked on a course that one official called, quote, the most difficult a human being was ever asked to run over. The track consisted entirely of dirt roads and fractured stone, providing difficult footing, with 7 hills ranging from 100 to 300 foot verticals and long ascents. Running on public roads also made the race somewhat of a game of Frogger, with runners having to dodge trains, wagons, streetcars, and dog walkers. Not even the air was safe, with cars driving alongside the runners, kicking up dust for them to inhale. Uphill running.
This is crazy. This is the most batshit thing I've ever heard. Like, these are Olympic athletes, supposedly the prime athletes of the world, and you are putting dust in their lungs when they're supposed to run 26 miles. That is insane.
Dusty mouth, scorching heat. I could really go for some water. What? Water? What are you, a pussy? Meet James Sullivan, chief org.
What the fuck was that?
Of the Olympic Games. One day, James pondered a question we all have from time to time. What would happen if I forcibly dehydrated someone? To study the effects of purposeful dehydration, James decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, planning a marathon with only a single water station on the course. A dirty well.
Dude.
11 miles in. That gave you dysentery. At the start of the race, Fred
What?
Lorse took the lead, with Thomas Hicks passing him
Okay, so this guy is making the Olympics his science experiment, but also they have dust in their lungs. It's 135 degrees, and they can't drink water. How in the world do any of these athletes finish this race? This is insane. What? Wow, that's crazy.
after. One of the barefoot South Africans was just a mile off course by wild dogs. John Lorden began vomiting profusely and gave up. William Garcia was found collapsing on the brink of death after coughing up blood in the middle of the track, hemorrhaging with a ripped stomach lining and dust-lined esophagus. Interesting. Meanwhile, Felix was actually making good time, despite pausing to talk to every spectator along the track. During the race, Felix casually remembered he hadn't eaten in the past 40 hours. He then saw people in a car with some peaches and asked for one, to which they said no. Hey, the fuck! Later on in the race, he stumbled upon an orchard and ate some apples, which then turned out to be rotten. He then started cramping and vomiting, so he decided to lay down and take a nap. Despite all odds and setbacks,
This guy took a nap in the middle of a race. Okay, I guess he's not gonna medal. I'm sure he finished like dead last.
Felix would actually go on to finish fourth.
Dude.
9 miles.
This guy finished fourth. And he took a fucking nap during the marathon. This is insanity. Sorry, that's so funny. I wish he medaled, because that would be the greatest medal story in Olympic
Fred Lorse called
history.
it quits after cramping up, hitching a ride to the finish line and waving at bystanders and runners as he passed. Thomas Hicks started to show signs of extreme exhaustion 10 miles in, and begged his coach for water. But his coach, believing the only people who ever needed water were Aquaman and pussies, settled for sponging his mouth out with some warm distilled water. Hicks really started to break down 7 miles from the finish, which is where Dr. Charles Lucas sprung into action, giving him a mixture of strychnine and egg white.
This is crazy. I'm sorry, I can't use other words, but this is the most insane marathon I've ever heard of. It shows how far we've come as a society, that we can not do this, basically. That we just hear stories about baseball players who used to smoke cigarettes in between innings and stuff like that. Wow.
Some call it a performance enhancer, some call it rat poison. I say it's 1904, so what's the difference? Keep in mind, early 20th century doctors were little more than licensed murderers. The car Fred Lorse was hitching broke down 19 miles in. Having recovered from his cramps, he decided to pull a sneaky and rejoin the race, passing doped-up Hicks and later the finish line in first place. Those at the stadium didn't know about Fred's disqualification, so they hailed him as the winner, and Fred played along. It even went so far that Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, Alice Roosevelt, took a picture with him and placed a wreath over his head. She was lowering the gold medal over his neck when a
What a fraud. But there's no cameras. There's a lack of spectators. Of course they're going to think that this man won the marathon.
spectator stepped in. Hey, yeah, that guy was disqualified.
You're a fucking disgrace. You didn't stay there before.
Okay, so I may have made that part up. I have an imagination. Sue me. The cheers turned to
Like, this guy is so funny. I'm sorry, I keep laughing, but this Blue Jay is hilarious, and he's the true Salmonella replacement. Let's be real here.
as Fred tried to play it off as a joke, claiming that he never intended to go through with it. Meanwhile, Hicks, who had lost motivation when Fred passed him, painfully picked up his pace after hearing of his disqualification. However, recently poisoned Hicks started to turn gray and limp, so they dosed him again with strychnine and egg whites. So you know how when you're watching the Olympics and think to yourself, these sports have a serious lack of alcoholism? Well, Hicks' team thought so too, so they washed the lethal drug down with some brandy. Why drink water when you can have ethanol? Hicks started running mechanically, like a well-oiled machine.
So they got this man drunk, which also dehydrates you, in 135 degree heat, with no water. I'm sure this is going to run swimmingly.
His face sunk, his eyes grew dim, his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. 20 miles in, Hicks started hallucinating, firmly believing he had another 20 miles to go. He begged his team for something to eat, but they just gave him more brandy instead. Poisoned and shit-faced, just like my 2 a.m. Taco Bell runs, Thomas Hicks swinged and shuffled his way over the final stretch, with his trainers carrying him across the finish line, where he received the gold medal. Only 14 of the original 32 runners finished the race, the worst finish ratio in Olympic history. Here's a graph of gold medal marathon times throughout history. And here's Hicks' time, a full
So
9 minutes and 8 seconds slower than the second longest winning time
okay,
in history.
so
It almost
To qualify for the Boston Marathon, you need to get sub 3 hours and 30 minutes. This guy won an Olympic gold medal, and he wouldn't even qualify for the Boston Marathon today. Just let that sink in. He would miss the Boston Marathon by 14 minutes, and he won an Olympic medal.
45 minutes longer than the slowest finisher in the 2016 Olympic Marathon. It took 1 hour and 4 doctors for Hicks to feel well enough to just even leave the stadium, having lost 8 pounds over the course of the race. So if Sullivan's experiment taught us anything, it's one hell of a weight loss program. So, in conclusion, while the 1904 Olympic Marathon featured the first 2 black Olympic athletes and a Blue Jay approved amount of alcohol,
there you go. The first 2 black Olympic athletes. Go random guys from South Africa.
it also resulted in multiple near fatalities and resembled less of an expertly organized event and more of an Ed, Ed, and Eddie scheme. 2 out of 10 stars.
So there you guys have it. There's Blue Jay. I hope you enjoyed him. Sorry if I laughed too much. I just find him very, very funny. And in my opinion, he is the true salmonella replacement. If you want more Blue Jay reaction videos, just let me know. And if you want to check out his channel, I strongly, strongly suggest you do so. Thanks, guys. Remember to like and subscribe because it helps build our channel. And we want to build our channel as well.